Okay, anything from last week? Any what do you call it? What's the word people say? Housekeeping. Any questions? Any confusion? Any I had one question, but I before I get to that question, anyone else have another question? It's pretty cryptic, isn't it? Mhm. So, Patrick had written to me earlier today asking about some more advanced meditation instruction. Um, Speaking on your behalf, Patrick, if that's okay. Thank you. I think if I read the email just once, but I think what is interesting the way you worded it because you said to develop calm abiding, one needs to meditate 4 hours, be able to meditate 4 hours. But actually, it's kind of turned a little bit around. When one attains calm abiding, one is able to meditate for 4 hours on one topic. So, I mean, it's a little chicken and egg kind of a thing. Um, so I think that what Patrick's asking is he wants to deepen his meditation practice, and I think um, comes a time for all of us to do that. Um, there is a really good program that I really, really like. Haven't done it, but presented by a longtime monk. I believe he's Dutch, um, Venerable Gendun. And I've asked Amy, who's on this in this class. I don't know if I think she's listening. If you could, Amy, if you could put your email address maybe or phone in the chat so that people can, if they're interested in this program, and it's an online program. However, in no, I might have this wrong. Yeah, in late October and November, Venerable Gendun is coming here. He usually comes about once a year, and he'll be at Land of Medicine Buddha and Vajrapani Institute. I don't know where everyone's located, by the way. I think a lot of you are in New Mexico, I guess. But it might be if you have the time and the space. He's a very, very good instructor there. I think, yeah, there it is. Yeah, okay, that's a schedule coming in there. But I can't read but if people have actually Gendun's um, website address, put that in as well.
I did.
But
It's
oh, you
there.
did? Okay. Because you can access, he has programs going now. I just don't know if he has programs that people can enter right at the moment or not. I don't know his schedule. If you want to write to Amy, she does know how he functions and how he operates that way. So you see it there, Amy Barton Caton. Okay. Um,
Amy and Jay and I are,
mhm.
and Christine, are you also in it? We're
Oh,
in this. We're also in this, and yeah, you
okay.
can start now. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, we'll let Amy handle it, but yeah, you can start at any time. But
That was my question. So people
um,
could enter it, join it now or now as well, is what you're saying.
he's just starting to get into the thick of
Hmm.
it.
And and I know he
So
runs a couple different programs, so I can't comment on those, but maybe you guys can help Patrick and the other people in the class out in terms of what they can attain, what you can attain, what you can attend, and yeah. Okay. Without further ado, let me share. So this week's topic is the myth of permanence. And before we get really started, well, we are started. Um, let's just sit for a moment and ask yourself, you can do it with your eyes gently closed and just kind of a sense of awareness. typically physically you want your head just slightly bowed, but the main thing is not bowed too much because then you fall asleep. But the main thing is to have the crown of your head in line with your lower back and your bottom, kind of like a straight line, but not too stiff. That can be in a chair, it could be lying down. And then just now, just let's do what we did before with the breath last week to count the exhalations as one, and the next exhalation as two, and up to 10. And then if your mind wanders, just bring it back to the number. And then from 10, count down to one, and then I'll chime in at that point. The question is if, uh, assuming that your mind wandered a little bit, did it wander to the future or was it fixed on the past? Just introspectively ask yourself that question and investigate. And now I want you to please look at the nature of the mind, what's occurring for you in the moment. Is it appearing to you to be static or moving? And it's not a yes, no question. It's actually see what you see. I mean, it is a yes, no question, but it's more experiential. When you do this kind of introspection, it's helpful to keep the breath in the background. I mean, in the sense that there's awareness of the breath as well. It's just not the primary focus. Okay. So why don't we go on from here? What did people find, by the way? Did you find that there was a preoccupation with the past? Was there a focus on the future, like what you're going to do? You know, it's kind of like it's a spontaneous thing. It's not really conscious. You can chime in if you want, or you don't have to. You know, to think about, I didn't ask this question, but in the reflection, it's helpful to just reflect back through your day and to think about where you've been most of the time. You know, can you get a sense of where your mind tends to abide? You know, when we're having kind of certain kinds of problems, it's because it's the past that we're focusing on, right? There's other kind of problems where it's the future we're focused, like anxiety can often be focused on the future, right? Because we project, the mind is seeing an event a certain way that's going to happen. It imagines, and the event that it sees it's going to happen is really true, isn't it? It appears to you as true. Like if you're going to do an interview or you're going to go to a doctor's appointment, you know, or something like that, to the dentist, or you have to drive somewhere you don't really want to go. You're not feeling too good or you're tired and you got to go. You know, it's like there's a whole mental image, isn't there? And if you haven't, this is the purpose of one purpose of meditation. Is remember we talked about meditation in the Tibetan Buddhist and even the Sanskrit translation of the term, it was often translated as to become familiar with, to become familiar. So here, what I'm really asking all of us to do is to see where your mind is. So, particularly when there is a problem or an agitation, maybe it's a better way. When the mind is agitated, when the mind is agitated, uh, think about whether the mind is perceiving something in the future or something that's percolating up from the past. Okay. Depression, depression can be both. Depression often is a concept or a thought that tells us what we're not going to have or what we are going to have in the future. You know, a sense of loneliness or a sense of loss or a sense of not enough, a sense of unfulfillment, either socially or with love, feeling unloved. We're going to feel in love, so it gets us more and more depressed because the future looks so bleak. And it is not to deny what depression's impact is, but if our job is to become our own therapist, because no one else is going to save us, then we have to be brutally honest. And then what we get depressed about are things that we, not only, by the way, often it's the mind is preoccupied. I'm not saying there's not a biological component and all those things. It's all actually, like we talked about in the myth of reality, is everything's interdependent. There's so many interdependencies. There's the biology and but where we can intervene is in the lack of control of our thoughts and feelings and mind. And it feels like we can't control those. And in fact, we can't at first. It doesn't come, there's no instant panacea. It takes practice, it takes training. We spent many years training ourselves to be depressed. Not consciously, it's not our wish, but it is a training because we develop habitual patterns. And those habitual patterns support the idea of depression. There's many other components involved. There's also last week's, in the myth of identity. With depression, there's an identity involved too, isn't there? Right? So when it's kind of interesting. So when we're depressed, that identity that's appearing, that we're clinging to, that we're believing in, is not the same identity as when we're feeling pretty good, when we're feeling loved, when we're feeling generous. Okay. So we could go back to the myth of identity, but we're going on to a new one this week. But these all are interrelated, and it's important that we begin to see the integration of all these different myths and how. So the reason that we're looking at these myths is only from the perspective of which one resonates for a person at a particular time as a helpful one to pursue. It's not that these exist independent of each other. They're just different angles of the way we get tricked. And to become healthy and happy and liberated is to become untricked. And a lot of people don't have the energy to do that, or they just don't have uh, the capacity to do that. So it's not like we can tell everybody do this. It's not like that. We have to have countless methodologies. But ultimately, if you really want to we're sitting here because we're interested in these ideas and we're interested maybe because we've tried other things or maybe because we've tried this and we know it works, but we're just not that good at it yet. Okay? So the central thesis of the myth of permanence is that human beings live as though things will last forever. Okay? And naturally we seek stability, certainty, and along with that is enduring satisfaction. I was having some, sorry, I have to use myself as the example, right? Um, Last night, what was I eating? Some popcorn. You got this bag of popcorn. And I was thinking, because I had worked on this, prepping this class yesterday. And I was thinking, each handful of popcorn I was taking, why was I taking it? One way we could say, because of the pleasure of the last bite, right? And it starts dissipating, doesn't it? The pleasure dissipates. So you take another handful, right? And so we're not one of the myths, the myth of happiness, I believe, or something. We will talk a little bit more deeply about suffering, but because I'm going to throw that word at you a lot of times because I think we have to get to the point where we're okay with it because it's not the best words. I've said that many times, but it's the only one we got. We have other synonyms, but the fact that the popcorn doesn't endure. There's a lot of components. There's the taste buds, there's the mind, there's the nature of popcorn, the physicality of it, all those things. We'll get to that in a minute. But just the mindset around that, each time I would reach for another bite, it's because I am under the influence of one of these myths or maybe many of these myths. And we could just, for the sake of this class, I was under the influence of, we could say, permanence, right? I didn't know that the truth of the popcorn and the situation is impermanence. Okay? Because I think that if I take a bite, it should be permanent. And then it's not. So then I have another bite. Why? To extend the endurance. Now, what happens when you get to the end of the bag of popcorn? So this is all misconception of what we spend our lives doing. And the misconception is I enjoy this popcorn. It makes me happy or whatever, satisfied. But it doesn't. And it's not doesn't take a big leap of wisdom to see that. But we don't think like that, and we're habituated that we get to the end of the bag, and then sometimes, I don't know, you think maybe I should just have another bag. But then the other part is, you sort of feel bloated or, you can't eat anymore. So it's all so changeable, isn't it? It's not permanent. But we're under the we're under the hallucination that it is permanent. And of course, we'll understand intellectually. No one in this room is going to say it's permanent. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the knee jerk, the the way the mind has trained itself. Okay. But reality is actually marked by constant change. Suffering arises when we demand permanence from an impermanent world. Okay. So, I always demand that we define our terms. I just have to, and it's, like I often criticize ourselves for being sort of sloppy. We are sloppy. Okay. We have to get more, we have to get more, I guess, disciplined. Um, when I say we have to, reminds me of a friend of mine that's not alive anymore. And he would like talking about he liked philosophy and we were talking, but the one thing, his absolute rule in the universe was never use the word should. And we used to argue about that. Because I understand the should, I get that. But there are some shoulds, I would think. But anyway, that's another story. But I think it's a should that we when I say have to, I guess that's a should, to become more rigorous in our thinking because we're sloppy. Maybe it's just me, but we do throw terms around. Now, when we're just talking casually and colloquially, that I'm not talking about, being annoying. And when someone says, you know, we should love everybody. It's not like having a debate with the person about that. That's right. I mean, that gets just annoying. But when we're actually studying the mind and we're studying ourselves, okay, and we're studying ourselves through this philosophical and psychological discipline, it is important to become aware of these terms, these definitions. So then you can then, or we can then go investigate them and see if they're true or not. And remember, I think in our first class, I said, we're not accepting these teachings or these ideas just because Karuna's teaching them or Buddha said them or Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, or the Dalai Lama. That's not what we do. Don't accept anything just because someone says it. But then it's up to you and me then to investigate and to analyze. And to do that, we have to know the definition of the terms. So, definition of impermanence, because we're talking about permanence in this one, is that which is produced. That's amazing because we've never heard that in just sort of our normal upbringing, have we? We didn't even think ever about what impermanent meant. And now we start thinking about impermanent. And it means that's the definition, by the way. And we'll break that down a little bit so it's manageable. If something is produced, it has a cause. Another thought that maybe we didn't ever think about. People don't think about that. If something is produced, it has a cause. That becomes important later. Okay, that becomes important also in our first class in the myth. All the classes, all the myths. Something is produced or not produced. If something is produced, we have to get comfortable with that. That if it's produced, it has a cause. And guess what? If it has a cause, it has an effect. So it has a result. It's a problem. Now let's get really philosophical here for a moment, okay? I hope you're okay with it. If you're in this class, I know you're okay with it. Um, well, I'll get to the next. We'll cover it in the next slide, I think. Oops. So there are two levels of impermanence that are articulated in Buddhist thought: gross or coarse impermanence, and this refers to the obvious, observable changes in the physical world that we often recognize, such as decay and transformation. This is the one that's about the seasons change, the day change, people get older and die. Our kids go to school, when they're young, they go from preschool into elementary, that sort of thing. Our car that we love now is a piece of junk later, or it's giving us so much problems. The house needs a new coat of paint. Um, all of these we think of as colloquially, we would probably people will say, "Oh yeah, impermanence means like that kind of a thing," right? That's not that interesting for us, but it's good we have to put it out there that that's not the level that we're really that interested in. It's helpful, but my standards are much stronger and much deeper. And not just mine, but in terms of the Buddhist approach to mental health, it's okay, this gross or coarse impermanence to become familiar with, yes. And I think many people who study Buddhist thought, now are more, more, what to say, in touch with that, more in touch with that. Uh, because it is expressed quite commonly in just if we're studying uh, Buddhist thought without going maybe too deep into it, it talks about birth, sickness, aging, death. Those are gross impermanence. Okay. And we all study that. And we talk about, don't cling too strongly to, your children because they're going to go off to their own lives in college or careers. So we have that. We do have a respect, I think, many of us, for gross impermanence as a fact. And we do try and deal with it. Like aging. I think there's a level of acceptance amongst people, Buddhists, that aging is part of life and may not be so, and it's hard for us to accept it maybe, but not everyone is in denial about those things. Of course, yeah, okay, so we'll get to that in a minute. Now, subtle impermanence is what we're much more interested in. It's a more delicate, less perceptible type of change that occurs constantly at a moment-to-moment level, typically unnoticed. And actually, I can't remember where I read it. It may have been Lama Zopa Rinpoche who said, no, maybe I can't remember. It may have been he who said it, or maybe I read it, that um, subtle impermanence is only perceived through yeah, as Rinpoche said, through using machines. He called machines were like instruments, but like a video camera. Which was this high speed photography or whatever, they can show you. Or there's different kinds of, um, I don't know what these instruments are, where, like for example, showing atoms and molecules moving, or, these kinds of things are not normal means to perceive impermanence, right? We actually can't see it. We can't actually perceive it until we can. And we can through developing and training the mind in meditation practice. Okay. In meditation, through the development, and that's why we develop the meditative mind. It's because we're trying to see reality. So the mind right now sees unreality, and it's the mind itself that will see reality. Your mind, my mind, is the only one that's going to see reality. Okay? It's not about God seeing it or Buddha seeing it, and that, I mean, we're happy they do see it, but that doesn't have any effect on us. They can't transport their perception of the world into our heads, okay, or into our reality. They can help us see that, by the way. There, it is possible through the right connection with a teacher, a teacher, an authentic teacher who has that level of realizations. It is possible that that teacher can uh, help you open your mind to have an insight into these qualities. That's the purpose of Guru Yoga when we talk about in this tradition, one of the strongest, or the root of the path in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, particularly in the Vajrayana practice, is the practice of the Guru Yoga. And the reason is because due to very, very extremely powerful connection, which we call through merit, good karma, then you can have that relationship with a teacher. Not they can't give you enlightenment and all those things, but in their presence, it's possible that your mind can open for a moment or two and have these experiences that are his or her experiences all the time. Um, so that's the value, and I'm kind of going way out there, aren't I? So when we're talking about impermanence, so we're talking about it at the atomic and non-atomic level. And so again, because we share a lot of time together, as and some people know from being with me in the past, that these are the only two options. Everything in existence, okay? Everything that exists is either atomic or non-atomic, which is kind of funny because I gotta let you in on a secret. There are a few things that this is very technical, so I'm not going to cover it, but there are a few things that kind of don't completely fall into that category. But when you look at them, they do fall into that category. They're not important enough to uh, split hairs right now. Those are in the debate schools and in the philosophical schools. So I'm just saying that in case someone thinks that there's something. They're kind of a combination of the two. Let's put it that way. That's why they're. But for our purposes, and it doesn't, those subtle ones are only for advanced meditators, advanced philosophers. And if anyone's ever interested, we can always talk about them. But it's very philosophical. Um, when you hear atomic, or molecular, atomic, right? So atomic is physical, or we say form. Okay, sit with that for a minute. So in Buddhist philosophy, there things are either fall into the category of being in the nature of form or in the nature of formlessness, non-atomic. Like I said, there's a few little things that are neither of those two, but they're not that profound. It's just conceptual. Okay. I mean, they're profound, but it's not necessary right now. So everything was going to fall into now. Um, so everything perceived by the five senses. But sometimes I like to look at your full pictures. Everything perceived by the five senses. So the sense of your eye sense, right? Your eyes see only forms. Your ear hears only forms. Sound is form. It took me a while to get to that, but it is form because I don't know enough about science. But look at um, sound waves, right? Sound particles. So that's considered form. Particles are form. Form, there's a definition for everything. You want the definition of form is that which obstructs. Okay? And it's kind of simple. Like when you really think about it, that's a pretty good definition. Sound waves can obstruct, right? It's subtle. It's not like, it's not like the obstruction of, my phone here, right? That's very solid form. But it doesn't mean that sound waves are not form. They do obstruct. Then the nose, so odors. Odors are made of form, right? Molecular, atomic. Taste, same. And tactile feeling. The body is form, right? When I say tactile, I'm talking about when you touch your arm here, the part of it is form. It does translate, just like eyes, just like sights do, sounds do, smells do. They all then get extrapolated and perceived by the mind itself, don't they? So when you have the experience, when I say, when we have the experience of seeing something, like right now we're seeing each other, right? Or images of each other, right? So that image from the point of view of the computer and the colors and the pixels and the shapes, that's all form. But the perception of it, the perception of that is in the mind. The experience, sorry. The experience of it is in the mind. That is formless. So it's such a beautiful, extraordinarily profound thing, the mind, that it translates or it transmutes form into a formless experience. That's phenomenal. I mean, you're just like, how does that happen? Okay. And that's what we're studying, but not totally in this class, right? So, can you see how easy it is to get tricked? So, all of those forms, the sounds, the tastes, the sights, the odors, are impermanent. So, I'm going to ask you, do you think, well, that's kind of rhetorical, I guess, but notice how when I think about something occurred today, something occurred, in your day today, maybe something that was annoying. Maybe a meeting went on too long. Maybe a meeting didn't happen. Yesterday I had two meetings. One was supposed to be at 9 a.m. With four of us, and one person didn't come, and we're all waiting, and we're waiting, and I was irritated, getting a little irritated. And this was an international call, so we're all in different time zones. And then the person showed up late, and the call was kind of over. So we decided to reschedule in the evening, and that same person got the time wrong. It was an hour late again. And every can you think about now something similar for you? Did you have anything like that happen today? Anyone have anything a little annoying, a little frustrating, a little irritating, disappointing? Could even be that you didn't have enough milk in your fridge when you went to get your for your coffee or tea. I want you to identify with this because when that can someone share with me one instance so I can use your example, not mine? Somebody can just go off my it could be a good experience. I don't care.
Really,
Yeah,
I have a very, very minor one. But
I like minor.
when I went to make coffee this morning, I had to grind my coffee.
Oh God, it wasn't ready.
It wasn't ready.
Yeah.
You understand, I can
Oh
tell.
yeah. It's inherently bad and irritating.
But I mean,
So,
that's as bad as it got.
yeah,
Wow.
wow. So this is so interesting because this happens every instant, right? So I'm glad you brought that up, Barbara. So when that's I want to make this relevant. What in that experience what in that experience double negative, sorry. What in that experience was permanent? I'll deconstruct it for you. When you're walking to your kitchen, there's impermanence, isn't there? It's changing. Right? When you reach in, I don't know if you keep your beans in your fridge. When you reach in your fridge and bring your beans out, where's the permanence? Is there anything that's not, is there anything that's fixed and not moving? Then you pour it into your grinder. But we're getting kind of irritated or frustrated or just, annoyed. When we're experiencing that, everything feels stuck, doesn't it? I mean, in other words, if you saw the movement of the atoms of the coffee, the beans, if you saw the movement of the atoms and molecules of your fridge when you're open up, if you saw the movement of your body's atoms and all the different things are moving at the time, where is it that you get irritated? Can you tell me go back on off mic for a second? Can you trace where at what point the irritation arose?
And when I realized that I needed to grind my coffee, I just didn't want to be bothered. I just wanted
Okay.
it to be ready.
When you wanted it just to be ready, that was a concept, wasn't it? When you get
Mhm.
back down to it, it's a concept.
Correct.
But it doesn't feel like a concept, does it? It feels like something out there is wrong. And then, you reflect and go, oh, it's just my attachment or it's just my just right. But that thing is poking. So this is where the mind is moving also. So not only is everything in your experience, our experience, but anything like that, there's nothing that's not moving, is there? So the irritation is not at all in your kitchen, in your coffee. Because if it's constantly moving, where do you poke the irritation? So it must be in the mind.
Mhm.
Now, this is the problem. The other problem. The mind, being non-atomic, we call formless, is also moving. So where is the irritation? So a concept comes up. I got to grind my own coffee. It's not ready. That's a concept. That probably lasts, I don't even think a second. Then the mind, what we do to habit, because we see that concept as permanent, fixed, we cling on to it. We latch onto it. That's the problem of life. Now, in the nature of reality or the myth of reality, we not only see it as permanent, but we see it as true. But we're not going to do that this week. We did that 2 weeks ago. But just to say that the nature, the myth of reality is a little bit deeper than this one we're talking about. This one about seeing it as permanent is part of seeing it wrongly, is part of seeing it wrongly. So we don't see the experience as it really is. Okay? We see it as we really are. We see it as we are, not how it is. And how we are is that's an experience whenever I get unground coffee, first thing in the morning that I think is going to be ground, I get irritated. By the way, I think I do too. I'm not picking on you, Barbara, right? I do too, right? Or it could be that you have an electric kettle and it's broken, and you thought you'd set the timer and it didn't go off this morning. It doesn't matter. What happens is this dynamic that's been going on for countless eons, that when a concept comes up due to my likes and dislikes, I see it as permanent. It really is that. It's not moving. But the irritation, the first thing that came up, by the time you open your fridge door, that concept was gone already a million miles away. Well, maybe not a million, but many, many other concepts and thoughts had already arisen within your mind, but weren't paid attention to. When we meditate and when we quiet the mind, it becomes a natural, it's a reality. It's a reality that the mind is moving instant to instant. Okay? But when we go through our life, we are not aware of that. As you meditate and see the fluidity of your mind, it does translate into when you're going into your kitchen and getting your coffee. These things do translate because it's training. The mind is this plasticity of the mind, it can be retrained. Okay? Okay? Yes, Barbara?
What about that process did I see as permanent? I'm not clear about that.
The trick is in that process, if it was a process where someone handed you a cold cup of coffee. Oh, first of all of it, by the way, is seen as permanent. All of it. But what happens is due to our conditioning, certain permanents affect us more and we cling to those. So in the case of the coffee, you had a visual at some point that stimulated a thought, no ground coffee.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So that visual was seen as permanent, unchanging. You didn't see it as a moving thing because we don't see that. In reality, when you open, is your coffee kept in the fridge or just on the shelf or
It's in the refrigerator.
yeah. So that coming and looking at your fridge, opening the door. Well, when did and not there's a moment. All of those are perceived. All those instances, every single one is perceived incorrectly, is perceived as static. It's like slides, permanence. One slide, rather than a film. A film is constantly moving. Actually, there are also slides in a way, aren't right? Right?
Mhm, mhm.
I don't know about how modern video works, but anyway, it's still going to be discrete. So one setup was when you saw there was one moment when you saw that aha, no ground coffee. Your mind stuck there for a moment on that permanent. Then the next thing is a concept came up, a feeling came up due to your past that was irritating, that stimulated an irritation because you weren't getting what you wanted. That's also permanent. So both are acting in that way. Does that make sense? What if just the fluidity of your mind was happening? Then this thing would be just that even if it was a moment of irritation, it would have flowed away. Flowed away? I guess. I can't say flew away. It would have flowed away, right?
Right. I mean, it was very short-lived.
Yeah, I'm making a big deal of it because you let me, right? But if it's something where, someone dinged your car, that whole thing gets that process gets extended.
Mhm,
Or someone criticizes you,
mhm,
right? It gets extended. And when someone that's a very good one. When someone criticizes us, or that sort of hangs for minutes and minutes or even hours. And we keep repeating the same thing they said. Maybe they said something and hung up the phone, and then we're stuck with it in our head. That's permanence. There's nothing permanent in that. I mean, the voice over the phone is still form because it's something atomic. There's sound waves, right? And there's a story, you probably know it, but there's a kind of story of these two monks walking along a river. Monks are not allowed to touch women traditionally. And they're walking along a river and they see a woman who's scared to cross the river because she's, afraid of drowning or getting swept away. So the first monk walks by her, and the second monk picks her up and takes her across, sets her on the other side. So the two monks keep walking along, and the first monk is really thinking, there's this kind of heavy silence between them. Finally, he can't help himself anymore, and the first monk said, why did you pick her up and carry her across the river? And he said, when I got across the river, I put her down. Why are you still carrying her now? That's a metaphor or an example of permanence. Okay. Should we go back to some slides? Someone else have another question? I hope I didn't confuse things, Barbara, or anybody else with that. Hope that was helpful. That's just my understanding. It's just my understanding. Someone else, Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, they probably would have answered it much differently, but hopefully I didn't confuse things. Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Karuna?
Yeah.
So in the ideal, what would have happened? You would have just had a mild state of annoyance and then just let it go, or nothing arises. Because I
In
think
the
in
I
everyday practices,
in the ideal, nothing arises. Experience
so
arises. Experience is there.
oh, yeah,
So
but
so what we're talking about, yeah, this is a great question because it doesn't mean you don't experience. Who wants that, right? Um, what happens okay, this vision or this view of permanence, like all the myths that we're talking about, are driven by what we refer to as ignorance, okay? And then there's not the ignorance like I don't know how to speak Greek kind of thing. This
mm,
ignorance is a wrong view. We see things wrongly. Okay. So, like this one, we see wrongly that it's impermanent and we see the permanence. So, and it's both things what you said. Do we come just slightly annoyed or not annoyed? It's a path. It's a path, right? So, it's a process. So, the
mm,
end process, yes, you don't have any annoyance. I often tell the story of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who was visiting one of our centers outside in Boston. This is many years ago, and on the weekend, director of the center had a house on the lake. I think it was actually Walden Pond, or near Walden Pond, and he took Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa and some friends out for a weekend, break. And it was hot, and they were just waiting and waiting and kind of stuff in the pond, right? Or the lake, I should say lake. And all of a sudden, there's six, seven of them, and someone said, "Hey, where's Lama Zopa?" Right? And they look around, and then Tim, my friend, director, saw off in the distance, you know, coming up from the water as a hand going like this. And that's, in the East, that's how, like, that means come here, you don't go like that. Come. And so Tim kind of freaks out and swims way over to and that was Rinpoche's hand, way over to Rinpoche and rescues him. He was drowning, right? And Rinpoche just kind of laughed. And I'm not that nervous laugh. He never panicked. He never panicked. which is a natural response for anybody. I mean, it's not like it's hard to even train in that, right? That's what happens. That's what happens. Why, or how, I should say, is this is where we get deeper into the philosophy later at some point, a different class, um, is because the way the mind is functioning is whatever experience occurs or is perceived by the mind, whether it's through your eyes or ears or nose or mind or tactile, whatever, if the experience is there, but there's no clinging. So there's no sticking to the experience as being permanent. It's fluid. And if it's fluid, where do you find the experience? Right? I often use the example of trying to put a post-it note on a waterfall or a river. But we do that all the time. We're constantly putting post-it notes every instant. That's that's what clinging is. That's what is meant by clinging. Okay. We have a desire or an aversion, and then we cling to it. Okay.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the desires and the aversions will be there because we're in samsara, but it's a clinging that creates the issue or that
Yes.
permanence in our mind. But
Yes,
to
there's two.
get to the point where there
Say,
is no clinging, to get to the point where there is no clinging, automatically no clinging like Lama Zopa, wouldn't you have to have a direct realization, experiential realization of emptiness for that to occur? Or can you get
100,
there with just meditation?
100%.
Okay.
That is, yeah, yes. That is 100%.
Mm,
And then also we can say that aversion and desire will stop also.
okay.
You know, but Riemann Lamy actually says desire is not a problem because it's the cleanness problem. Because, we have desire to attain enlightenment, we have desire to help others. Desire gets purified, I would say. Maybe the idea. But like with anger, no, the anger irritation is a kind of anger, actually. That does disappear. You don't have the imprints anymore. So as soon as clinging and when one develops the view of this emptiness that we're talking about, then those as you have we have imprints of anger from the past, but as they arrive, they aren't even they're just dissolved.
Mhm.
And eventually you don't have them anymore.
Okay.
But you do have imprints forever because you have the imprints to help others, for example. That's what the practice of virtue is, right? And compassion, that leaves those imprints. But that's going really far down the road, and I'm going too far. But yes, emptiness, and I'm sorry because the woman who asked last time about what is a non-affirming negative, you remember? Does anyone remember that question? It was kind of technical. You know, emptiness is a non-affirming negative. It's like, you know, emptiness is not something there. It's the absence. Okay. When we see the absence of true existence, we see it empty of true existence. That's emptiness. But when we say, read this one the other day, the fat monk doesn't eat at night, implies the fat monk eats in the morning. Okay. That's an affirming negative. Okay. But in this case, if you say, um, anyway, with emptiness, it's you see an object and you see the lack of its inherent existence. That's a non-affirming negative. It's not something in its place. But that's going too far. Sorry. Okay, should we go back? Any other questions?
No, that was good. Thank you. So helpful.
Okay. Kim, is that helpful? Kim, Kim's my eyes and ears.
I
Okay.
so I have a quick question. Well, kind of maybe you can. All right. So my morning coffee experience this morning, and I think it is probably what Barbara experienced, I'm guessing, is I poured the last of my cream into my coffee cup. And then my realization was, if I want a second cup of coffee, I'm going to have to go to the grocery store.
I get that one.
And so, and then I thought, oh, do I have milk? No, I'm out of milk. Then, so I'm problem solving. Is the problem solving the formless? Is that closer to, anyways, it turns out that I have a can of evaporated milk, and then I wouldn't have to go to the grocery store.
Yay.
But and then yeah, and then my mindset went somewhere else. But is that the formlessness? Is that moving, that problem solving? Is that closer to um, the
Not,
attachment, or is that yeah? Oh, Bill,
mm,
Bill
no.
suggests that we all switch to tea. Um,
The problem solving is not, the problem solving doesn't mean bad. That sounds like a good thing. But in the context of permanence, it's the same, it's not that different, right? Because and that's not a blame thing. It's just how the mind functions. It's just, and it doesn't mean that when Lama Zopa Rinpoche sees the impermanence of things, he doesn't problem solve. Of course he does, you know. But his problem solving process is different than ours, or was different, I should say, you know. Which also is interesting because when we, and again, I'm all over the place tonight, aren't I? When our uh, problem solving processes like Lama Zopa's or the Dalai Lamas or Lama Yeshe, other great meditators and lamas, guess what else happens? Other possibilities pop up because you've opened the space. But we're so narrow in my problem solving is in my, and all of a sudden the what happens is for Rinpoche, he doesn't even need any milk. He doesn't need any tea. All of a sudden, that's a better problem. That's a better solution to the problem, you know. But that's my own. I'm just talking from my own
Can
bias.
you, Karuna, will you say a little bit more about how their problem solving technique differs from different from ours? I'm not clear.
Completely different. It's completely different because what's the problem? You know, it's like, what's the problem? Is the problem that we don't have milk? Is the problem that we don't have the right kind of milk? The problem is our desire for the tea is running our life right then. That's the problem. He doesn't have that problem.
Karuna, I have a
Hang
question.
on, just a sec.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, does that make sense, Kim?
Hmm.
The problem changes. You know what the problem comes for him? Not making this up. Problem is, oh my God, I don't have, there's no milk for Karuna's tea. That's Lama Zopa's thinking. The problem changes. And then he runs off to the store to get milk for me, not for him. Yes, Barbara. God, we're having a town meeting.
Back to Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
Yeah.
Clearly, he was problem solving because he raised his hand.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. He's always problem solving. But his problems changed. His problems, you know what? And I'm extrapolating because of my of being around him. The problem for him, okay. In very early years, I was in Nepal then. I was at Kopan Monastery, and he stopped eating. He was only a few, let's see, he died 3 years ago. He was 77, 78. I'm 71. Oh, that was 3 years ago. So he was about 10 years older than me. And so he must have been about 30. He just stopped eating. Not suffering. He didn't have anorexia or something because he couldn't find the purpose to eat. He had no desire. I mean, he didn't have attachment or desire that drove him to eat, like with us. And he couldn't find a reason to eat. So Lama Yeshe wrote to their root guru, Kapje Trijang Rinpoche in Dharamsala. I think it was Trijang Rinpoche. And Trijang Rinpoche wrote Lama Zopa a letter back saying, you need to eat. Start eating again. Because if you don't eat, you can't serve sentient beings. Okay, purpose changed. And because Rinpoche for himself had no reason to eat. He had no sense of self preservation, so to speak, or self desire. He didn't have anything to achieve for himself anymore. And it might have just done it just to reaffirm his highest bodhisattva vow, you know. Maybe he knew anyway. So yeah, so it changes. So that's the problem changes. Then the problem became not problem not eating. The problem became, well, how am I going to take care of sentient beings, living beings?
So that was probably his motivation then for reaching out to be saved.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
There wouldn't have been any, because when we develop, we talked about the identity last week. Um, Remember I told you that I mentioned that our focus is the misunderstanding of our identity, and the misunderstanding of how everything else exists, the identity of everything else. So Rinpoche had not learned, it's kind of understatement. Rinpoche had developed the complete understanding of this identity and how it didn't, and therefore at that point, that false identity begins to dissolve. The one we hold as we think is our identity doesn't mean you dissolve. His self-identity had dissolved. I believe maybe entirely. Sorry, the misconceived identity completely dissolved. So it was very common with Rinpoche. You found that he just didn't think of himself anymore. But if there's no self-identity, who's there to think about, right? If you say, if someone says you need to worry about your children more, and you don't have any children, it's an irrelevant motivation. You need to earn more money for your children. Well, I don't have any, you know. Okay. Anything else? Should I do a few more content stuff? I know why not, right? Education. I got so much to do, so little time. Atomic, non-atomic. So if things change every year, okay, this is important. If they change every year, do they change every month? If your house changes every year, does it therefore change every month? If it changes every month, does it change every week? If it changes every week, does it change every day? If it changes every day, does it change every hour? It does. This is not how we think typically. Now, if it changes every hour, does it change every minute so that it can change every hour? It has to, right? If for it to change every minute, then it has to change every second, right? You know where I'm going with this. So every second then can be broken down as well, right? Into nanoseconds. So in impermanence is a thought. If impermanence impermanence means that which is produced, is a thought something that's produced? Think about that. Is a thought something that's produced? Or the only other alternative, it's already there or never there. Isn't that weird? You never thought about this, did you? Patrick, have you thought about this? You have. If a feeling is a feeling something produced or not? We can say emotional feeling or physical feeling, it doesn't matter. So if I criticize you and you feel hurt, is that something produced or not? It is. That it's impermanent then. If it's produced, it has a beginning, middle, and end. And how fast does that beginning, middle, and end happen? When you break it down, your mind quiets, going down, down, down. That process happens. You can't even find the present moment, actually. Is an opinion something that is produced? Our opinions about the political situation, our opinions about Trump, our opinion about the Iran war, is that something produced or not? But we think it's real and it's permanent. That view of the war in Iran, when we're grappling with it, is appearing to us as something not produced. It's appearing to us as something fixed. Sure, you can say, no, I know it's produced because if something's not produced, it doesn't change. It can't decay. I know these might, for some people, be new concepts, but it's just scientific. If something's not produced, it either doesn't exist, okay? Like the horns of a rabbit. It's not something produced, is it? So it doesn't exist. I mean, it is permanent, by the way, because it's not produced, even though it doesn't exist. And that's about our opinions, but we believe our opinions and our attitudes and our moods are fixed because we don't realize they're produced. So now, what produces a depressed mood? What produces an angry attitude towards our political system or what's going on? What produces that? Okay, I'm going off this thing for a second.
Attachment and anger.
Yeah. Okay. What produces our, yeah. So can you see that I'm really irritated? I'm pissed off with what's happening in our country and the world. Well, not the world, our country like that. But when I'm feeling that, I'm experiencing it as if it's true and fixed, permanent. It's not something produced. Someone just answered, I couldn't tell who it was, said, no, it was produced, right? If it is produced, because it came up in my mind, 10 minutes ago, it wasn't coming up in my mind. And then I turned on the news and it's the same old crap, right? And it got produced again. And it got produced from what? From earlier opinions and earlier feelings. You know, when I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I don't think so. When Trump got elected, then it started doing this crazy stuff. Or when he was elected in 2000, whenever it was, last time. You know, what I feel today about the situation is something that's been growing, hasn't it? Evolving, maybe that's a better way to put it. That means it's produced. And since it's a mental thing, a mental attitude, a mental mood, it's there's we are going to do the myth of randomness, which is the idea of cause and effect. But to let you in on a little secret first, the mood of being angry about the situation, it's a mood, right? So it was not produced by something physical. A result has to have a similar cause in nature. So, when they say in school, my my, my wife often jokes about or makes comments about um, the kids saying, "You made me angry. You hurt my feelings," and she gently teaches them the Buddhist view, secular, that no one can hurt your feelings. Trump isn't making me angry. Trump is a physical thing. Physical things do not produce formless things. And we already had that discussion. Guess what the implication was when I showed you that atomic, non-atomic? Atomic things cannot produce non-atomic things. Non-atomic things or formless things cannot produce form things. So Trump did not produce my formless attitude. And my formless attitude didn't produce something physical like it's because I was, because you're angry with Trump, therefore, you know, someone tried to assassinate him. Didn't produce the gun, didn't produce the person. So formless things can't produce form, and form things can't produce formless. So we got to get ourselves straight. We got to, as my friend says, we got to get ourselves sorted out. Why does this matter? It matters because we want to be happy. You know, when I'm pissed off, and I am upset about situation, but that upsetness is not it's not happiness. It's not contentment. And that's our goal in life. Goal in life. And let's add something to that. As Mahayana Buddhists, it's our goal in life, one for me, but also I think I can't leave everyone behind. I have to try and share that with people and help them get it as well. So that's where the compassion comes. So our practice is not just for self-centeredness, uh, it's the only way we can help other people. What was it? Was it Gandhi who said, an eye for an eye produces a world full of half-blind people? Yeah. Anger only produces more destruction. It's sad to say because sometimes it feels really good to retaliate. I mean, we think it feels good. Okay. From where is the thought produced, by the way? Where is the feeling produced? Where is an opinion produced? Where is a mood or attitude produced? It's produced in our own mind. And by the way, can't come from your mother and it can't come from your father. Sorry. If you have anxiety in your life, I'm sorry it was not produced by your mother or father. Doesn't mean the conditions weren't there. These things don't happen without conditions, of course. That's very important. But here we typically confuse conditions with causes, right? They are not the same thing. The cause of my anxiety has to be something mental. But that cause cannot manifest without conditions. Okay? So, for example, DNA is something that's form. Without DNA, certain DNA, it doesn't manifest. That's why, like, yeah, the conditions aren't there, then you're not going to experience it. So we do have to take care of conditions, of course. We're talking about causes, though. Okay? So the illusion, yeah, I already said this. The idea of identity compares this to placing a post-it on flowing water. Okay. So the myth of permanence is the belief that things remain stable and lasting. We expect people, emotions, and circumstances to stay the same. We resist the reality of continual change. This resistance creates suffering. When I got when I got busted for drugs in the ninth grade, my mother was devastated because she thought I was something else, right? Like this nice kid. I was a nice kid, but didn't include drug use. Okay. The myth of permanence, a permanence identity used to be, I don't know what's gotten into you. I mean, you're really a loving person. Why are you doing this? Because you're holding this view of permanent identity of a person. That's a setup to be disappointed. Okay, so impermanence is a fundamental reality. It's like gravity. It's a law. Everything conditioned changes continuously. Conditioned. That means everything that's conditional, connected, in relationship, that's what condition means. Okay? And we have to meditate on that and think, all the different things that are conditional. Okay, all those things that are conditional are even right this moment in a state of change. Okay, the wall of your room is conditional, so it must be changing. It's dependent. The wall, the thing that looks fixed, your cabinet in your room is conditioned. One of its conditions is atoms and molecules, right? And we know from science, atoms and molecules are in a state of change, flux, aren't they? So without impermanence, by the way, we cannot attain enlightenment or liberation. So it's not just tragic. It's great because if there was permanence, we'd be stuck, unchangingly confused or unhappy or dissatisfied or limited. Okay. Yeah, it's good to circle back to why we're doing all this. And this is our unique articulation of suffering. You know, we use the word suffering, maybe incompleteness, but it's generally that liberation is liberated mind, a free mind is one that has control. And we already discussed our minds do not have control. It can happen any second. Well, it's all, you know, if we just say, hey, okay, everyone, if you have control, then between now and the class next week, um, you will not get irritated or angry once, okay? Because you have control, I have control, right? I'm not going to take that bet because I know I don't have control. Just that's the challenge. If you have control, stay happy all week. Stay unflustered. Stay unconfused. Stay non-irritated. Okay? Oh, and if you have control, then don't sleep also for the next week. Don't get tired. Because you have control, the body might get tired, but your mind won't, right? Because we have control over the mind. So I'm going to make it so you don't. So you see what I'm saying? It's really become in touch with that lack of control, I think is one of the best definitions of what the Buddhists mean by suffering. Okay, lack of freedom. And when, you know, we find out we're sick because we have control, we'll just be happy. When we find out we have cancer, we'll be happy because we have control. But I've seen people that are able to do that. So that encourages me. It's just I can't. So this mind that has little balance is constantly up and down. Some people are more up and down than others, of course, but there's not a constant, steady balance or peace. And it has little depth, mainly just living in the senses. So there is a human need for stability. It's because we want permanence because it creates a sense of safety and control. The mind craves continuity and predictability. We seek stable relationships, identities, and success. The desire for certainty is deeply psychological. And everything has changed. Bodies are deteriorating and age, relationships evolve and dissolve, thoughts and emotions constantly shift. Nothing remains exactly as it was. But we cling. We cling to stop all that and fix everything. That's what clinging is. Okay? Impermanence is continuous. It is not occasional. It's constant. Everything arises, changes, and dissolves moment by moment. The mind creates the illusion of continuity, and we mistake movement for stability. Now, I want to go jump because we only have a few minutes. There's a lot of things we can do. I'm going to go to something. Oh, this is just interesting. So we should be aware that this myth is not just within our heads. It's in everyone's heads. And if you look at our culture, it's constantly reinforcing the sense of permanence. I mean, just watch commercials. What they're trying to sell us is the idea that this thing will permanently provide the service or the thing that we're wanting. Promising lasting fulfillment through consumption. Lama Yeshe used to say the best psychologists are advertisers. They understand the human mind. The anti-aging culture denies aging. Society often hides death from awareness. Okay, I just want to cover this for a few minutes because often when we meditate or we're instructed to meditate on impermanence, we're immediately directed to meditating on death. Why would that be? Because death is actually a gross impermanence. It's not a subtle one. But what happens with death, why it's such an important one, is because it's something that happens to us all. Everything, every living being dies, and yet we don't really have any education around it in this culture. I'm speaking generally. Okay, it avoids, modern science avoids confronting mortality. And, when you live in Nepal, particularly before, I think it's still kind of, someone dies, you see them, the funeral procession taken down the street, not with every, they have a lot of tribes in Nepal, so some different, but, particularly some of the Hindu tribes, they wrap the body in orange cloth and saffron cloth, and they'll carry it through the streets with a whole procession of family, and people are crying, and there's the dead body. You don't see the dead body, but there it is. Whereas we don't see dead bodies. I saw a number of dead bodies in Nepal. They don't have that thing of masking it. I don't, maybe because it's always so vivid, in the culture in those days. I mean, I don't know. Maybe now it's changing. Um, and people have the same trouble with it as we do, but it's more, let's say, tangible. So, um, I think that from the, excuse me, Buddhist point of view, and maybe other religions or thoughts, awareness of mortality can deepen appreciation for life. I think that's true. The more you become aware, like we hear elderly people, something, often talking about regrets that they didn't do this, or they're giving advice to younger people, about enjoying it, making it meaningful while you can, and about aging and death. Okay. But we don't have that in our awareness as young people. And also, sadly, in our culture, older people who are really aware of death, or people maybe dying from terminal disease, it can be very scary because we haven't shared with them a methodology and an understanding of death so that they can face it with more clarity and calmness. And this is what I wondered. Last thing is, we often hear people say, I do, I'm not good with change. Okay. So I think in the next, we don't, we have one of our myths is about death or I think reincarnation, maybe. Maybe we'll talk about it more, but transition, are you good with transitions? Okay. You have to ask yourself, are you good with transitions? The better you are with transitions become, like, I don't know, retiring or getting married, having kids, facing a new job, and, or losing your job, these kinds of things. These become metaphors, how well we'll do with death, by the way. Okay. Because we want to do good with death because it's going to come, but it's not something we get very educated about. Okay, I think I stopped there. Let's see. Um,
Karuna, I just put a better link in with regards to information about the in-depth meditation training.
okay, good.
This is much better than what I sent before was an accident. This is good.
Okay, does everyone see
Okay.
that in the bottom of the chat? Can people see it? I think they can. Okay. Yep. And like I said, if anyone wants kind of more direct support, they can contact Amy or Jay or whoever, just get someone's email address and
Karina, Barbara was just raising her hand.
oh yeah, okay. Barbara?
You touched on it briefly, and I need more touching on it, and maybe next week.
Uh-huh.
Oftentimes, conditions, causes and conditions are lumped together.
Yeah.
And you made just something that was, I was just about to grasp onto it, and then we moved on. Can you talk more about that perhaps next week? The
What is
different
next week's topic, Kim? Do you remember?
The myth of randomness.
We will. That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot there that I was just starting to get at.
It was a trailer.
Awesome. I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
To be
Okay.
continued.
We continue. Anything else? Anything? Questions? Confusions? Comments? Okay. Okay, good. Thank you very much. See you next time. And important, I always forget this because I'm not a very good Buddhist. But when we start, remember I think I said at one time point, when we come into anything, each instant actually and each event, um, if I can just talk for just one more minute, uh, content-wise. So we've talked about the nature of the mind a little bit, and part of one of the schematics, we could say, of understanding the mind is when we break it down into what we refer to the six consciousnesses, and then we talk about the 51 mental factors that accompany these they're not part of the six consciousnesses, but they are interdependent. 51 mental factors are things like love and hatred and anger and jealousy and envy. There are also things like equanimity and love and there's positive ones, there's negative ones, and there's neutral ones. So five of the neutral ones, there's five that are always present. I mentioned these before, but the five that are always present, even when you're in a coma, okay? And also, at least when we die and go into the intermediate state, they're always there. Anytime now, they may not be so active, by the way. Most, one of them is intention. So the mind is always moving towards something in experience, right? Whether it's, yeah, so it's always moving to looking at the screen, to looking at the colors, you know, and this happens all the way from a conscious intention, like I want to go to this class so I learn more. That's an intention, to the very subtle, that intention, that rather um, coarse intention comes from a subtle intention. So they're linked. And so the subtle intention means the mind is always directed to something. That's what's meant by intention. Okay. And when we talk broadly speaking, every action we go into, every action we produce, involved in, has an intention behind it. So when we do things like classes and meditation, anything, then the practice becomes always do everything with a positive intention. So it's conscious. So it's the common practice when we go into a class, we set a motivation because there's a motivation already there. Usually it's something like curiosity but here we catch our intention. We go, okay, and I'll explain in the randomness next week. Be sure to ask me why this matters. Okay. Why intention matters. And why should I change? Why do I think about my intention going into a class? And typically what we say is, generate the intention that I'm taking this class, or I'm doing this meditation, or I'm doing this action for the benefit, in our practice, for the benefit of all living beings. Okay. And then when we finish a class, we have what's called the dedication, or yeah. So dedication here means you seal up that experience. So we've spent an hour and a half together. Now we make countless imprints. Again, going to our topic next week, countless imprints. And then we can kind of like protect those imprints and say, okay, now everything I did here, my confusion, my learning, my questions, my talking, I'm going to dedicate that my mind becomes fully liberated in order for me to liberate all other living beings. That's the best intention. And then those imprints we created last hour and a half are sort of protected. Okay. And that is a psychological process as to how that works. Okay. So now I've done that. For those who want to dedicate, then in your minds, dedicate. And thank you very much. See you next week.